Good wishes to all of you. Philosophy of Service, an approach to human development in India and the problems of our working class. Part 3 audiobook. The capacity for impersonal loyalty. This glowing picture of what India can be tomorrow is marred by our knowledge of what she is today. The present is undoubtedly unpropitious, but it is the product of a long tradition of political unwisdom and moral stagnation of our people. Every citizen should be aware of this national weakness and consciously work to end it. We had established in India many political states in the past. A study of why and how they failed and why we failed to establish an enduring national state will contain many salutary lessons for us today. Our states of the past were ruled centered. The heart of the state was the person of the king or the emperor. As at the top, so at all the lower levels also, it was a person in authority that counted, whether it be the commander in chief, the viceroy in the province, and such other functionaries lower down. The people's loyalty was to the person of the ruler or of the other functionaries below. Our big country failed to develop either at the provincial or at the central level an impersonal political loyalty to an Indian state. Our loyalties became shaken with the death or removal of the person of the ruler, or the death or removal of the person of the commander in chief. Foreign invaders seem to have known this weakness of our people and of our state or states. It is not an isolated experience in Indian history of our national armies, fighting bravely against an invader, melting away when the king or the emperor or the commander in chief was killed during the battle. And foreign invaders would often aim their arrow or their shot at the king or the emperor or the commander in chief seated on the howdah. Such melting away of our armies has taken place even by the spread of false news to the same effect by the invaders. Not only the army and the people in general, but also the officers and the feudal lords failed to develop an impersonal awareness of and an impersonal loyalty to an Indian national state. Their loyalty was primarily to themselves and to their self interest, and secondarily to the person of the ruler as a means to the former. The lessons of the failures of our past efforts to build an enduring political state in India should be burnt into the minds and hearts of our people today. We must assimilate the truth that a strong and enduring political state cannot be built on the basis of mere personal loyalties. We need to develop an impersonal loyalty to our new free national state and to the high principles embodied in its constitution. We need to develop a respect for our constitution and an impersonal capacity to respond to the rule of law. This addiction to principle only and not cheap sentiments, which we have inherited in abundance, becomes an additional source of strength for national integration. We are slowly and painfully learned this lesson of impersonal loyalty to our infant democratic state. Whatever strength it has shown during the last 20 years of its existence, whatever stress and strain it has faced and stood, is derived from this source. Whatever weaknesses have shown themselves up, similarly reveal only the long distance the nation has yet to travel to acquire this basic virtue, which we need not only to strengthen our political state but also to strengthen, purify, develop, and ensure the continuity of all collective and institutional activities within the state. It is not a rare thing in India to hear people say, I used to take keen interest in such and such an institution when so and so was its head. But now that he or she is gone, I have no further interest. An institution represents a certain social vision and the effort at its realization. If our loyalty is to that vision, we would continue to bear witness to that vision by continuing to serve the cause of the institution, even if circumstances have necessitated change in the person at the head, involving, however, no departure in the ideals and programs of the institution. The capacity for imaginative sympathy. The cultivation of their impersonal loyalty, however, involves a spiritual growth within man from the psychophysical self to the psychosocial self. This proclaims the intimate relationship between ethics and all true politics. By such impersonal growth, man becomes a richer personality, says ethics. It is this impersonal, personal attitude that constitutes the ethical content of a citizenship, without which citizenship merely means that one has only to stand in the queue and wait until he or she attains the age of 21. Unfortunately, this latter view of citizenship is what most people in India have understood and acted upon, and it has contributed not a little to the prevailing national weakness and despair. Nepotism, bribery, business malpractices, and other evils which are afflicting free India have their sources in the preponderance of blind Maya over lucid Daya, and in the absence of that detachment from the worldly personality, in the absence of that spiritual growth into the impersonal, which alone endows one with mental clarity and moral strength to follow the path of justice when called upon to adjudge the claims between less qualified personal and kin and better qualified other persons. Attachment to oneself and to one's relatives is Maya, and love for all is Daya, says Sri Ramakrishna. The spiritual growth of the citizen will not only enhance the spirit of justice in society, and justice in one of the most stabilizing and integrating social forces which alone can make individuals and groups accept gracefully the shortages and privatizations of a developing economy, but it will also enhance greatly the citizens' capacity for sympathy and fellow feeling. During the past centuries, our character had for its ingredients a bundle of negative virtues instead of positive ones. Our traditional outlook for sympathy was as much limited and prejudiced by this and by personal factor referred to earlier as was our traditional loyalty to the state. Our religious and social codes did teach us to be kind and sympathetic, but our response to human suffering was neither imaginative nor sustained. As a people, we did not fail to respond to suffering and distress in front, but this response took the form of tossing a coin or two to the sufferer and then passing on. It looked as if we did this more to be relieved of the sight of suffering than out of a moral concern to see that the suffered suffering is relieved. We did not care to follow it up to see that social maladies are traced to their very roots and eradicated. Better if this so called sympathy could have come out of its prevailing static, petty fringer, worldliness, and self centered socio-political attitudes. When we substitute a dynamic spirituality for that, petty-fingered worldliness and a deep social concern in place of our bundle of negative virtues and self-centered socio-political attitudes, we develop a capacity for impersonal service, a sympathy of a wide-ranging and sustained quality. This is imaginative sympathy. It is not tied down to a concrete suffering in front, nor does it end up by the tossing of a coin to the sufferer. Imaginative sympathy proceeds from a deeper source in the human personality. It proceeds from its spiritual dimension, from which dynamic ethical and social values proceed. This is the personality of the citizen. Such citizens alone are the guarantee of social health and social progress. And when administrators are recruited from a social milieu, which consists of a general body of such citizens, the administration becomes responsive to social urges and needs. The difference between a police state and a state aiming to be a welfare state lies in this social responsibility of the latter. And this is the product of that spiritual growth of the members of the administration yielding the precious capacity for impersonal sympathy, for imaginative sympathy. The Secretariat and other institutions or office of the state are far away from the actual sense of human life with its urges and privations. Yet the administrator, through his imaginative sympathy, recognizes and responds to that far away social situation. With his imaginative sympathy, he sees the file in front of him, staring into life and whispering many human urges and dissatisfactions. Every citizen needs to develop this rare capacity, but the administrator and the politician need it more. Without it, they both, singly or in combination, can turn a nation into a mess of problems. With it, they can lift a nation from utter suffering to a sunlit height of cheer and hope. Dynamic spirituality. It is this transformation of man in India that will fill our politics and administration with a sense of urgency, with a sense of purpose and direction. With this imaginative sympathy, things will move faster and faster in the administration, and the nation will march faster and faster towards its designed goal of general welfare. It is the greatest asset for the administration of a state such as ours, where the most glaring fact is its centuries long arrested development and mounting urge. Since independence, for the minimum of human happiness and welfare gushing out of the hearts of millions and millions of its people, who have been, in the pungent words of Vivekananda, living the life of next door neighbors to brutes. The grasping of this fact and an advocate response to it by an administrator provides the finest and the only scope for the development of his character and efficiency, and for the retention of his youthful zest and joy in his life and work. This is the type of glory and greatness that should descend upon men and women in India in general and the members of the administrative services of the center and the states in particular. It will make for liberation of the spirit of service as a pervasive principle, lighting up the dark and dismal horizon of our nation today, and raising the spiritual quality of the life of its citizens. To go here and there to be spiritual is like going here and there to breathe. It is all here and now. We have to realize that spirituality is not magic or cheap mysticism, that it is not to be sought merely in caves and forests, but that it is birthright of one and all, and is to be cultivated in the fields of one's life and work. In the midst of its ups and downs, our people need to be inspired by this practical and realizable ideal which Vivekananda has put before us in the modern age. He exhorts us that it is far better to live for an idle for an instant than to lead for years the life of jellyfish existence. The words uttered by Queen Vidula in the Mahabharata for the benefit of for her son, King Sanjaya, breathes a heroic message for all our youths. Udyoga Parva. Muhurtam Jwalitam Seryo Natu Dhumaitam Siram. It is better to flame forth for an instant than to smoke away for an age. Some of the great men of India, like Shankara and Vivekananda, lived short but intensive lives. Theirs was an intense dedication to God and man, to God in man, and it changed the course of human history. It is better to live intensely for an ideal and vision than to vegetate for long years in a humdrum existence. This is a powerful sentiment that can drive away the clouds of cynicism and frustration from the sky of India. Every educated citizen has to teach himself or herself that he or she not only is in India but is also of India and is responsible for the nation nation's well being. We have to inspire ourselves with the conviction that we have been called upon to be an instrument of our nation's purposes. What can be a greater glory for man in India today than this? That he is living in the most creative period of his nation's history and that he is privileged to contribute to it, big or small. When cynism and frustration lay their cold hand of death on a person, he or she is unable to respond to any higher value and becomes suspicious of all values except his own self interest. Bernard, Bernard Shaw refers to this type in a famous passage. This is the joy in life, to be used for a purpose which you consider mighty, to be a force of nature and not a cloud of elements and grievances ever complaining that the world does not devote itself to making you happy. These are the two alternatives before us in India today. Here is the great current of Indian national life. I am a part of it, shaping its course and being shaped by its current, losing my smallness and meanness in that great national participation. But if I cut myself away from that current, I become a stagnant pool, swampy and malarious, a cold of ailments and grievances, ever complaining that a nation has not done this or that good to me. All expansion is life, all contraction is death, says Vivekananda. More people have taken the path of spiritual contraction, bringing the nation to the verge of despair and disintegration. From now on, let more and more people take the path of expansion of social awareness and sympathy, and the capacity for calm, silent, hard work inspired by team spirit, and we shall arrest this downward trend and turn the nation to progress and prosperity, unity and strength. Bhartrhari's social classification. We can better understand the autonomy of our society today by listening to what poet King Bhartrhari says about the human types in a society. Bhartrhari hailed from the Malwa region of Madhya Pradesh and lived over a thousand years ago. Says he is says he in his Niti Satka, verse 74. Ete Satpurusha परार्थघातक स्वार्थान् पारित्यये समन्यास्तु पारार्थमुद्यम्ब भारत स्वार्थ विरोधाने तेमी मनवराक्षस परहितां स्वार्थ्य निहनन्ति ये तु घंटी निरर्थकं परहितं ते केन जानीमहि. Sorry for reading like this. There are some Satpurusas, good people, who engage themselves in the good of others, sacrificing their own self interest. They Samanyas, the generality of people, on the other hand, are those who engage themselves in the good of others so long as it does not involve the sacrifice of their own self interest. There are those others, the Manava Rakshasas, devilish men, who sacrifice the good of others to gain their own selfish ends. But alas, what am I to say of those who sacrifice the good of others without gaining thereby any good to themselves or to anyone else? The first category is that of the Satpurusha, the good man. What does his goodness consisted in? It is an overflowing goodness, uncontaminated by any selfish motive. Such people always work to ensure the welfare of other people without caring for their own self interest. This is the most glorious type in any society. They form its spiritual elite. They are, as the New Testament puts it, the salt of the earth. Apart from those whom the world looks upon as divine incarnations, the Satpurusha category includes men like Gandhiji. He might have remained a barrister and could have led a comfortable life, but he discovered himself in others and, dying to himself, lived for others. He dedicated himself to the work of rescuing from slavery and fear millions of his fellow men, and making them realize the dignity and worth of their manhood and womanhood. The poet then speaks of the second category, the Samanyas, the generality of people, the majority in every society. What is their mental makeup? They serve the interest of other people so long as it does not collide with their own self interest. That is what British ethical and pol- political philosophy calls enlightened self interest, and the majority in any society will be of this type. And what India needs today is an intelligent appreciation and application of this philosophy on the part, especially of her industrialists and businessmen. They have to realize that it is in their own self interest to see that the nation prospers and grows. Industry and business have to realize that a flourishing economy demands the widest diffusion of purchasing power among the people. Foolish ways of getting wealth by which the rich become richer and the poor poorer are destructive of the process of wealth getting itself in a laissez-faire state. The difference lies precisely in this, that in the later the motivation is mere self-interest, in the former it is enlightened self-interest. Ethics does not demand of this category of people that they sacrifice their self-interest to do good to others. It permits them to seek their self-interest, but it tells them to widen their concept of self by fully grasping the truth of the interdependence of men and groups in society. If I keep my premises scrupulously clean, but do not care to see that the town or village in which I live is also kept clean, I cannot escape the consequences of an epidemic breaking out from that insanitation in my environment. Is it therefore in my own interest to see that my environment is sanitary? As societies become larger in territories and population, the concept of self in man's view of his self interest needs to be correspondingly broadened. A narrow idea of self interest is based on utter ignorance of the social mechanism with its subtle interdepending processes. Hence, it is unenlightened self interest. This becomes more glaring as a society becomes more complex with not only national but also international interconnections. Hence, the need for raising self interest to the level of the enlightened variety. This philosophy of enlightened self interest is today inspiring international relations in such fields as the sharing of economic prosperity and technical know how through trade and aid extended by advanced countries to developing countries. But it needs to be implemented much more within the national societies themselves, where all self interest needs to be purified by the touch of enlightenment. The poet then goes on to describe a third category which he characterizes as Manava Rakshasa, devilish men. What is devilish about them? They destroy other people's welfare to gain more profit and pleasure for themselves. This is the Rakasa type. And I'm sorry to say that since independence, we have been manufacturing this type in large numbers in our country. Every conceivable form of food and drug adulteration and corruption afflicts our nation today. What is the source of this affliction? Men and women are out to gain profit and pleasure for them, slaves at the cost of misery and unhappiness to millions. Why do they do so? because they have failed to grow beyond their physical, biological selves. They have sharpened their intelligence and will be education, but failed to give a moral orientation to them. By putting these great powers in the service of their lower selves, they have become efficient instruments of social evil and suffering. And this is what Manavarakasa meaning means. At this end, one of these people adulterates drugs to gain extra profit to himself. At the other end, the drug is administered to hundreds of children with no effect. The children suffer and die. But what does he care about the social consequences of his action? He cares only for the profit from his business and is callous about its consequences to his fellow men. This is the Rakasa type, a low type of humanity, but many of them are capable of being corrected by social and state action and transformed into the second type, the enlightened self interest category. The poet can understand the ways and motivations of these three types of people, but he is at a loss to deal with the next or the fourth category and exclaims, "ठीक है ना? Janima hai." I'm not able to understand them. Why? Because they believe in wanton destruction. They destroy other people's welfare, even though they do not gain any benefit to themselves thereby. Every society contains a few such morally demented people. Our nation has a more than healthy share of this type today. Conclusion: this is a picture of human society everywhere. These four types are there in Russia, America, Japan, China, and in all the countries of the world. As we have them here in India, the only difference is in the ratio of the four types, and this difference in ratio makes the difference between society and society. As for the first type, the Satpurshas, every society does have a small minority of this group, unselfish, compassionate, morally alert, and spiritually sensitive. Every society must jealously create and nourish the small minority. Every society will have a majority of its population belonging to the second type, the Samanyas, motivated by self interest, but of the enlightened variety. But every society should take steps, educational and preventive, to see that the ranks of the third category are thinned, if not entirely eliminated, and the fourth should be completely eliminated. It should never be allowed to rise again. As to the second category, there is great need for vigilance so that it does not slide down to swell the ranks of the third category by too much preoccupation with self interest and too little with enlightenment. This group has to be specially alert to see that its self interest is illuminated by its being subjected to the large interest of society. The moral health of the nation entirely depends upon this immense group steadying itself by drawing inspiration from the small minority of the Satpurusha group above it. I do hope that as remarked by me earlier, the self criticism which is evident in our nation today and which is a sure sign of the basic health of our society will slowly generate the necessary moral forces to cure the nation of its present elements. The ailment is a moral ailment, and the remedy has to be a moral remedy. We all decide that our nation should be healthy physically as well as mentally. We have achieved some notable successes in tackling our physical diseases. We have practically conquered malaria, which was such a scourge even 2 decades ago. We are on the way to conquer the scourge of tuberculosis, with the leprosy next on the list. As a result of these measures, we have considerably raised the nation's life expectancy from about 29 to about 50 years since our independence, besides improving the general health of the nation. But the greatest challenge to the nation today is the malady that afflicts its mind and heart: cynicism, self centeredness, and utter unconcern for others are more deadly than the most deadly physical diseases and the viruses that cause them. For they corrode the nation's resolve to stay free, to be united, and to march onward to progress. We cannot be blind to the fact that this disease has already invaded our body politic, including our youths. We have to take energetic measures to arrest the further progress of this disease and to eliminate it from the body politic. And the nation has to be alert thereafter to see that these deadly mental viruses do not invade our society again. This is the responsibility of every patriotic citizen. We have no king or emperor ruling over us today, as in the medieval and other periods. We live under a democratic setup which derives its strength from its free, disciplined, and responsive citizens to whom service of the nation is politics and religion in one, and in whom the nation has its guarantee of unity, strength, and continued progress. The subject of the philosophy of service, therefore, is not meant for academic discussion in the dull philosophy courses of our universities. It should stir the minds and hearts of every section of the population. It is thus that the nation will get the necessary strength to meet the recurring challenges this age of revolutionary transition will throw at it. If India succeeds in responding to these changes adequately, she will become a beacon of hope not only to herself but also to the whole of humanity. We have responded successfully to many a challenge to our national existence and integrity in our long history, and we shall face and overcome this challenge as well. With this faith in ourselves and in our national destiny, let us from this day onwards enter our respective fields of life and activity with hope and courage.